Arc 7, The Land of the Wolves. Chapter 35, A Night for Talking. Medium, the place where Big Bro and I were was a really bad place. That was what Medium had said in her usual tone, as they surrounded a campfire at night. Always bright and cheerful, Medium never cared to keep her voice down. What had come out from her mouth was the story of the orphanage in which Flop and her used to be previously. From Flop, too, it had been heard that the two of them had grown up in poor conditions. The siblings had grown up while being beaten every day, in a facility that took in orphans. Flop had stated that they resented a world where unfortunate adults would beat up unfortunate children, and that they had vowed to take revenge, as well. Medium, I don't get everything Big Bro says cause it's too difficult for me. But when he's walking around with such big steps and his chest puffed out, I want to help him. Subaru, even if it's revenge against the world? Medium, yes. Though, I dunno how he's gonna do it. With a bashful smile, Medium plunked down cross-legged, taking Lewis into her lap then brushing the girl's hair from behind. The reason she had spoken about the orphanage in the first place was because of her skill in dealing with children. He was surprised that Medium, who, if he may say so, gave the impression that she did everything in a relatively rough manner, was taking such good care of Lewis. So, he asked her about her familiarity, which led them to the previous point. Medium, because there were other children in the facility besides Big Bro and me, you know. Some of them were smaller than me, and it wasn't much fun, so I wanted to at least let their hair grow. Subaru, so, because of that, you're good with the little ones. It makes sense, since you're very good at taking care of people. Medium, you think so? Well, if that's the case, I'm glad I could help. Medium's beautiful blonde hair glimmered, illuminated by the red glow of the bonfire. Lewis, to her front, had hair the same color. The two of them were so intimate they appeared to be sisters. If Flora was considered and not Flop, one could say that there were three beautiful sisters. Subaru, I shouldn't have thought of imposing such a liability onto you and Flop-san. Medium? Natsumi-chan, did you say something? Subaru, no, it's nothing. It's just that I really feel that Medium-san's been a great help to me. Setting aside the improper connection between the O'Connell siblings and Lewis, it was a statement that seemed to have been wasted under false pretenses, but that was how he truly felt. There was a great deal of help from the presence of Medium and Flop being there, both militarily and emotionally. Had it not been for Flop and her, Subaru and the others' march through the Empire would have been much bleaker. Subaru, in that respect, shouldn't you be more grateful? Narrowing his eyes as he said it, Subaru tried to lure a response out of Abel, who was sticking right by the bonfire. Surprisingly, Abel had not made his quick return to the carriage for rest after dinner, instead remaining in silence. However, it did not appear that his attention had been focused on the chit-chat, or on Subaru's words that were merely sarcastic and teasing. Abel, Medium, where are you and your brother from? Medium, huh? However, though not in response to Subaru's words, Abel posed a question to Medium. The content of the question was based on the conversation that had just taken place. Caught off guard, Medium's large eyes widened to their fullest and her mouth dropped open. It seemed she was surprised that Abel had started a conversation with her, and that he was listening. Medium, Abel-chan, you know my name? Apparently, those were not the sole reasons for her surprise. Anyhow, Abel let out a small sigh at Medium, the latter having utilized a way of addressing him equally as disrespectful as what Al had used, one that could displease His Majesty the Emperor. Abel, remembering names is a trivial task. Cease such trifling admiration. Answer my question. Where are you and Flop from? Who was the head representative of that facility? Medium, representative? You mean the director? I don't remember his name, but me and Big Bro were in a little town called Avrik. Abel, Avrik. That's a town to the west. I shall remember that. Medium? You're gonna remember it? What for? Abel, it shall be dealt with accordingly. Whether I do it directly or not. Abel's answer was succinct, but his true intentions were lost on Medium. A question mark appeared on Medium's face, and her expression was like her head had been stuffed full of questions. And Abel, unkind as he was, did not attempt to try and dispel the mystery. Subaru, for his part, did not quite get the whole idea, but... Subaru, so you want to listen to the people's frank opinions and immediately apply them to national politics? Abel, I am not that laudable. I have told you. It is a matter of definite punishment or reward. Achievements should be rewarded, and foolishness punished. That was Abel's creed as a ruler, and it seemed to be an unmovable way of being. Thinking back to the lifeblood ritual at the Shadrakian village, he had desperately appealed to Subaru as the latter was on the verge of death, to tell him of his wish. Behind the desperation laid the same belief. Namely, Subaru, you're the kind of person who can't stand it when other people come up empty-handed, aren't you? Abel, many are dropped into this world as have-nots. What they grasp in their hands and what they die with is their life. There should be no thing such as letting go of something one has earned. Subaru, hearing that from the emperor's mouth, having been born as a have-not's unpleasant. Most people were have-nots, and had no choice but to struggle on, lamenting their incompetence and inability. They knew that life was like that, but could not tolerate being told that from the standpoint of those who were blessed. However, Abel did not even regard Subaru, who took this as irony. Abel, I am no exception. Subaru? What do you mean? Abel, with the position, comes a certain amount of responsibility. If one carries a burden that they cannot bear, then those who are crushed are no more than fools. Character and pride can only be honed by daily self-awareness. In response to Subaru's question, Abel's gaze slowly turned toward him. He observed Subaru sitting next to the bonfire, and directed his sight to his dark hair and clothes, as if to examine them. Abel, false and contrived identities shall eventually be exposed. You seem to be quite adept at disguising yourself, but it shall take some effort to mend it once it comes off. Subaru. Abel, I do not interfere with other people's interests as long as they produce results. I do not mean to contradict that statement. To see a false image as a pillar of support is something I cannot tolerate. Eventually, the entire foundation shall tilt. Abel's eyes, bathed in a feverish breeze, were as clear as a cold night. The words he had chosen had no room for consideration or understanding by others. Therefore, the true meaning of his words was not even half understood by Subaru. The only thing that remained was the pain of having had his heart insulted so callously. Abel, I have spoken too much. I shall be leaving the rest to you. After saying that, Abel stood up and disappeared into the carriage. The thick door closed with a thud. The only people now remaining around the fire were Subaru, Medium, and Lewis, who was oblivious to the topic at hand. Subaru, what's with that guy? Then, making a bitter face as he held his own mouth, Subaru blurted out those words. It was as if he was a sore loser of a villainess, wasn't it? The iron-blooded female military strategist, Natsumi Schwartz, was much tougher and more supple. That was Subaru's never-ending desire for a heart of steel, and the image of the strongest woman in its possession. Medium, Natsumi-chan, are you okay? Medium's hand gently stroked Subaru's conflict-laden head. Medium moved dexterously next to him, sitting on her haunches, not letting her buttocks touch the ground. Her hands were proportionate to her height, large enough to grasp Subaru's head with ease. Her large palm gently, and softly, wrapped around Subaru's heart. Subaru, yes, I'm fine. I mean, that guy was so insinuating. Did you understand what he was trying to say, Medium-san? Medium, not at all. But I could see that Natsumi-chan looked like she was in pain, so this is the least I could do. Subaru, that's not true. Medium, it's okay, I know. I'm in charge of using my big body to do my best and leave the hard stuff to Big Bro and everyone else. Medium smiled pleasantly and continued to pat Subaru's head, her face not showing any lie. Even though she was aware of her shortcomings, she did not permit it to bother her and had a sunny disposition, something she had in common with the people Subaru admired. Subaru, you're very mature, aren't you, Medium-san? Medium, no one's ever told me that before. Although I've been told things like that I'm a good older sister, or that I eat a lot without having any issues after. Subaru, those are other nice things about you, Medium-san. Medium, wee heave. Because he was unable to express his gratitude and admiration even with all his words, Subaru was frustrated. However, Medium merrily accepted Subaru's hollow words of praise. Lewis, curled up in her lap, was happy, like she was being carried along by her cheerfulness. It was a moment so peaceful that, to Subaru, it felt as if he'd been cut off from all hardship and anxiety. He ended up imagining it as such, so peaceful was this time. Time flowed protractedly, as he gazed at the flickering flames of the fire. Subaru. The world was so quiet, with the crackling sound of burning chips of wood popping. Subaru used to hate this kind of idle time. When spending it in a daze, he would feel tormented and driven by an unfathomable sense of urgency. He wondered if he was allowed to spend his time aimlessly, as if he were in a stupor. An unidentified black shadow would creep up behind him, crossing their arms around his shoulders in an intimate manner, persistently hounding Subaru. Keeping this nightmare away was impossible, even if he plugged his ears and closed his eyes to escape from it. Natsuki Subaru had attempted everything. At times, he would be praised for his versatility and guile. But all of that was just an excuse to escape from responsibility and guilt. Natsuki Subaru was papier-mâché, the result of a series of excuses. Subaru, I'm just a little relieved that it didn't end up being just an excuse. Is that so? After listening to Subaru's story, Tarita nodded her head. On the other side of the flickering flames, Tarita's face was lit up red as she knelt on the ground. The shimmering radiance of the flames appeared to suit her brown skin quite well. And to mention something suiting, so did her outfit that concealed her identity as a Shadrakian. Tarita, having removed the white patterns on her body and being dressed like a civilized person, coupled with her tall and well-proportionate body, looked like a beautiful woman dressed in men's clothes. However, as she stood guard as a night watchman, she had taken off her jacket and rolled up her sleeves, giving the impression that she was more wild than smart. Tarita. In the slight silence that fell, Tarita was lost in thought. She had pestered Subaru into speaking of his personal circumstances of his original world. He had made the darker and heavier parts of his life ambiguous, but how had it affected Tarita? It had all begun when Tarita saw Subaru cleaning his nails and asked, "Where did you learn to wear makeup?" Using makeup and cross-dressing were not that big of a deal to him. Subaru had spent his junior high school year in disarray, and had taken up the challenge as a bit of entertainment to make a spectacular comeback in his high school life to come. Subaru, I'm a bit of a meticulous person, so if I'm going to do something, I want to be thorough and not embarrassed to present it. As would be the case in any field, the efforts of many predecessors were involved in the development of arts. Subaru's high school life ended as a result of his attempt to show that he was not embarrassed of it. Since then, he had made up his mind that he would never dress as a woman again, but here he was. One never know what would be useful in life until it was over. In Subaru's case, who would not die even if he died, that rang especially true. Subaru, oh, that's not funny. Tarita, Natsumi's attitude, I'm jealous of it. Subaru, what? Tarita, why are you so surprised? Subaru, oh, no, it isn't something I've been told very often. It was a rather serious shock, and it took Tarita by surprise. However, the shock in Subaru's mind, as he pressed his fake breasts, did not go away. Objectively speaking, Subaru did not feel that his position was worthy of jealousy. It was partly from his own perspective, but ever since he came to this other world and, in retrospect, even before that, his life had been a series of failures and disappointments. To be honest, had it not been for his encounter with Emilia, he doubted he would have had the chance to turn things around. Subaru believed that all his encounters and happiness had been given to him by Emilia, who had tried to save him from being beaten up by some thugs in that alley. The memory of that moment no longer was present in Emilia's mind, though. Tarita, I've always grown up hiding behind sister. Sisters as we all know her to be, so no one doubted she'd eventually become the chieftain. Neither did I. Subaru, Tarita-san. Falteringly, Tarita began to talk about herself. At first, Subaru had intended to stop her if she started talking about something she did not want to speak about, as a response to his confession. She had inquired him about the source of his makeup and cross-dressing skills, and Subaru had told her about himself, which were his own problems. He had no intention of forcing her to do so. However, upon noticing Tarita's moist eyes and trembling voice, her visage downcast, he halted. She was talking because she wished to, that was what Subaru felt. Tarita, sister and I are 3 years apart in age. But the reason why I feel sisters so big isn't because of the 3 years difference. That's right, isn't it? Subaru. Tarita, what sister could do when she was 10, I couldn't do when I was the same age. It wasn't a difference in age, it was a difference in something different. What that is, I don't know. Every word that Tarita spoke pierced through Subaru's heart. It was a story he had heard somewhere, yet, simultaneously, it was a story he had never disclosed to anyone. An inferiority complex towards her outstanding elder sister, something Rem had been harboring. An inferiority complex towards the person he yearned to be like, something Subaru had been tormented by. Tarita, why did my sister make me the chieftain? I just can't see myself in that role. He's that guy's child, after all. The disappointment in oneself. The feeling of guilt regarding the expectations of someone dear. Nearly overwhelmed by these feelings, Tarita had embarked along on this journey. Mazelda, the former chieftain, had pledged to assist Abel on his journey with the goal of reclaiming the throne. Perhaps it was a journey for Tarita to reflect and acknowledge herself, and at the same time, a way to escape the burden of expectations that had fallen upon her. Tarita, during this journey, I have to find an answer. No, I need to harden my resolve. Subaru, resolve. Is that resolve to take over as chieftain? Tarita. Subaru's question was met with a nod from Tarita's thin chin. It would be unfitting to say she had arrived at an answer, but to say she had readied herself to a fitting fate was possible. The duty of being the tribe's next chieftain had been entrusted to her by Mazelda. He could understand that was the way she considered it. Tarita believed that taking over as chieftain was inevitable. She believed that she had no right to reject it. That it was the duty of a sister who had been appointed by her elder sister, and that she must lead the next generation of the clan. Subaru, even if you run away. Tarita, eh? Subaru, even if you run away, I think it'd be fine. I wouldn't blame you for that. The astonished expression on Tarita's face conveyed to him that she had not expected to hear such words. Though that had been the flow of the conversation, Tarita had confided in him her innermost thoughts. Her situation, the insecurities, the responsibility she carried on her thin shoulders, could be seen. He could also see that she was extremely responsible and self-punishing, and that she was struggling to cope with it. Or perhaps Tarita had wished that Subaru would tell her to get a grip here, to encourage her to make a decision that she could not make herself. Perhaps she wanted him to advise her that there was no such thing as a lack of self-confidence in the sight of Subaru proudly and unashamedly wearing women's clothes. But what Subaru had told her had betrayed her expectations. Subaru, if you can't bear it, if you think there's someone better suited than you, we won't blame you if you pack up and leave the carriage. At least, I won't. Tarita, but, if I'm gone, our strength will be. Subaru, of course, I'm worried about that. But I'll do whatever I can. Tarita. Subaru inwardly ridiculed himself for saying such selfish things, though he did not display it. If he heard this exchange, Abel would be discontent. As Tarita had said, she was a valuable military asset to their faction, which lacked in strength. That could be attributed to both their faction as a whole, as well as to the group on this journey. Of all things, he wondered whether it'd be fine to let them go. Tarita, you're saying I'm not needed. Subaru, no, that's a big mistake. I also want Tarita-san to be with us in terms of both personality and strength. But that'd be selfish of me, wouldn't it? Tarita, selfish. Subaru, because I'd be telling you to numb your feelings so that I can live. Being an experienced and kindred spirit, Subaru could not force Tarita to do that. Subaru, who had been given the opportunity to exit the dark place previously, had declared to Tarita, who was older and possibly more experienced than Subaru in this matter, much like if they were senior and junior. You cannot be someone else. No matter if they were a blood relative or just someone close. No matter the degree one had longed for them, envied them, or scorched them into their heart. You cannot be someone else. Subaru, we can't be anyone but our own self. He could not be anything other than himself, and he had to at least become something he could like, something he could be comfortable with, something he could be confident in. Like a butterfly that would hatch after repeated disappointments, discouragements, and a small sense of accomplishment. Subaru, it's unpleasant, isn't it? So whispered Subaru, in a voice so quiet that Tarita had been unable to hear him. What he was recalling as he spoke was the ideal that Abel had conveyed to him a few hours prior, around the same bonfire. What many of the have-nots were clutching at, living with, in their empty hands, he had wondered. The essence of what he had stated seemed to overlap with what Subaru was attempting to say. Tarita. Listening to Subaru's story, Tarita's eyes swayed, her hesitation becoming even stronger. It was up for Tarita to decide which way her hesitation would lead her, but he knew that he should respect whatever she chose. Subaru had run away from the expectations placed on him and the guilt of not living up to them. He even suspected that his being summoned to this other world had been an act of consideration by someone who had taken in his desires to escape. Of course, that was the reason as to why he had been unable of saying goodbye to his parents, his real parents. Subaru, you know, the fact that I was able to escape was salvation. At the very least, had he stayed locked in his room, always trapped between expectations and guilt, Natsuki Subaru would not have been able to catch up with his current emotions. He would still be Subaru, his hands full with himself and no opportunity to strain his own heart, or to do something for someone else, or to give something to someone else. There was nothing wrong with running away until one was ready to fight. This should be a world in which everyone could choose not to fight. Tarita, confidence and determination. Subaru, what? Tarita, I'm lacking in confidence and determination. But that's not all. Hearing Subaru's story, which came from his own experience, Tarita muttered, her lips trembling. It had been so small that it seemed to have been drowned out by the sound of the crackling bonfire. Or perhaps she was filled with acute emotion, more so than when she had recounted the tale of her own powerlessness. Tarita, if I make a big mistake, how could I make up for it? Subaru, mistakes and making up for it. Tarita-san? Tarita. The question was repeated and Tarita let out a small ah. Her eyes widened, and Subaru could see the regret in them. In the same way she had spoken of making a mistake before, her regret for what she had ended up telling Subaru peeked through. It seemed like Tarita had been burdened with a lot of guilt regarding that big mistake. Not only the helplessness of comparing herself to her sister, but also the existence of her sister seemed to be a factor that prevented her from making her own decision. Tarita, the strange things I said. Please, forget them. What followed in the end was the conclusion that her untold story could not be told. He could tell by Tarita's voice and expression that she had not arrived at an answer, but Subaru interpreted it as a sign that he could not force her to talk. If only he could be there for her when she eventually felt the need to vent. Bro, time for a shift change. Upon Subaru's conclusion, a voice called out from the carriage. It was Al, twisting his thick neck as he slowly walked over to the campfire. The time for Subaru's shift was over, as the night watch was supposed to change every 3 hours. Subaru, I'm not happy that Abel and Lewis are out of the rotation, but... Al, stop it, stop it. It'd be a terrible thing if we get executed for having Abelchan work the night shift once he returns to the throne. Subaru, if you're on about grudges, I don't think I'd be able to decide how many of my heads should be lined up for that. Al, if you're aware of it, please control it. Because it'll make me nervous to be around you. Overhearing Subaru's rambling, Al made a reasonable complaint. Nevertheless, he would continue complaining about Abel's attitude going forward. The reason why Abel was so arrogant and tyrannical was because no one had ever spoken up. While he remained as a fugitive with no real power, to correct that character as much as possible was needed. Subaru, otherwise, even if he returns with our help, another rebellion will soon ensue, and he'll lose his head that time. Al, yeah, I'll leave that to you. As you can see from the princess, I'm basically a laissez-faire kinda guy. With a fluttering wave of his hand, Al threw out the idea of getting Subaru to change his mind. Sighing at Al's unreliability, Subaru turned to face Tarita again. Tarita-san, he called out to her as she gazed at the fire, lost in thought. Subaru, I'll leave you to it. If you find Al's sexual harassment or silly jokes unbearable to listen to, please let me know immediately. Tarita, sexual hara. Al, I'm not gonna act the same as I do with the princess. It's a matter of distance and intimacy, and TPO. Subaru, that's something I'm not good at. Tarita replied in a faint voice, while Al loudly proclaimed his innocence. After comparing the two, Subaru stood up and whispered to Al as he brushed off the dirt on his hem and buttocks. Subaru, perhaps Tarita-san will ask you for some life advice. If she does, please guide her as an experienced leader. Al, experienced leader seems to be the opposite of my description, doesn't it? I can't be responsible for other people's lives, as I've been actively running away from such things. Subaru, this is your chance to overcome your weaknesses. It's the same with Peppers. Emilia and Beatrice, who were not fans of Peppers as well, were also trying their best to overcome their dislikes in various ways, without losing their bold, challenging spirit. The two of them had yet a single battle together, but Subaru believed that as long as they kept fighting, one day they would be able to win. Subaru, so, please do your best, Al. Al, is it just me, or that doesn't resonate that much? At least, what he had just said met the conditions to inspire Subaru, so he concluded that the problem was with Al, who was not affected by it. Tarita, Natsumi, see you, tomorrow. Subaru, yeah, see you tomorrow. Tarita called out to Subaru, who handed over the shift to Al and turned to head back to the carriage. That feeble yet certain promise of tomorrow gave Subaru hope that she would accept Subaru's words, and that they would meet face to face the following day. Running away was not a bad thing. There was power to be gained as a result of running away. But there were also people who would steel themselves to fight instead of running away, and were able to overcome it. Subaru hoped that was the case with Tarita. Subaru. Back at the carriage, Subaru was greeted by the tranquil air of the dark interior. The interior of the carriage was divided by a simple curtain, separating the sleeping quarters for men and women in the front and back. The men were at the front, the women at the back, but the group currently sleeping was surprisingly quiet. Abel, Medium, and Lewis were the three resting right now, and how quietly Medium and Lewis were slumbering, Abel notwithstanding, seemed to him relatively surprising. Upon questioning them about their sleeping patterns, knowing that it was against etiquette, Medium had cheerfully replied, "If you snore too loudly, people will know where you are." It was not until some time later that Subaru realized that it had been during her travels as a peddler, or during her days in the facility that had been stated to have been in poor condition. A skill acquired out of necessity. In that sense, it might also be the reason as to why Abel slept quietly. Subaru, you look odious, even when you're asleep. Perhaps I should doodle on you. What, you are staring at me quite rudely. Subaru, hook. In the middle of the allotted space in the carriage, Abel was sleeping. Upon peeking at his slumbering face, Subaru was startled by the sudden voice. He almost let out an instinctive scream, but Subaru managed to restrain it, instead saying, "You're awake?" Subaru, since we're keeping watch, I'd hoped you could at least enjoy the benefits of it. Abel, it is the custom of the Valachian royal family to sleep with one eye open. I am no exception to that rule. Subaru, with one eye open, this isn't a movie. And, you serious? Abel, why should I crack a stupid joke with you? Subaru's breath hitched after Abel's retort, the latter unconcerned, one eye open as he had declared. The light in his dark eyes proved that his earlier words had been no deception. There was an old movie that talked of an assassin with the habit of sleeping with one eye open. Apparently, the structures of the human brain made performing this difficult, but seeing Abel doing it as a matter of fact in front of him, made Subaru realize that it was not impossible. But that was not the same thing as being convinced. Subaru, why don't you sleep properly? Do you think we're going to hurt you in your sleep? Abel, if there is a small chance, then it is a possibility. You cannot lose your life for lack of attention. Subaru, lack of attention. Hearing that detached reply, Subaru's voice trembled and he pointed out the window. All that could be seen through the carriage window was the light of a campfire some distance away. Two people, Al and Tarita, stood on night watch, on the lookout for any looming danger. Of course, it was also for their own safety, but... Subaru, who the hell do you think they're doing that for? Abel. Subaru, after all this time, you still can't even close both eyes in front of us? Natsumi Schwartz's skin peeled away, revealing Natsuki Subaru from their contorted expression. Faced with this, Abel's clear expression did not waver. As he had done in the past, Abel blinked alternately with his right and left eyes. Even the number of blinks was minimal, which was the same reason as to why he could not sleep with both eyes closed. The time they had risked their lives together in the lifeblood ritual, when they infiltrated Geralt dressed as dancers, and when they boarded the carriage and headed for their destination, were no different. Subaru sympathized with the people who had to be on guard, in a situation where failure was not an option. So, why would Abel not make an effort to loosen up before entering a place that could be hostile territory, at least? At Subaru's raised eyebrow, Abel closed one eye. A single eye. He closed a single eye, folded his arms, leaned his back against the seat, and snorted. Abel, do not consider any ideas about distorting my way of being. Mind your place. Subaru. Abel, the demon city is close by. You must do your part. I desire no more, nor shall I allow it. Subaru clicked his tongue as he was confronted with an untenable disconnection. There had been times when he thought he could be able to make some progress, but it was still no use. Subaru, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm going to snore so hard. He raised his voice in annoyance, but Abel did not respond. Subaru frowned in bitterness as he settled into a seat as far away from Abel as possible, loosened his clothes, and laid down, with care not to damage his wig. He thought about keeping himself awake as an act of rebellion against Abel, but Subaru was unsure what would be the point of doing so, or whether sleeping or staying awake would be the right thing to do, and so, his consciousness went blank. The carriage ride continued with various problems, anxieties, and relationship values in the air. The arrival at the demon city of Chaos Flame was just around the corner. Chapter 36, Chaotic Demon City. Louis, you. As she pointed at the cityscape in front of them, Louis bounced her butt off the driver's seat. Subaru would have liked to warn her that she was disturbing the handling of the Galewind horse, however medium, the one who held the reins, pulled Louis by her shoulders and said with a cheerful, yet unrefined I know. In addition, Subaru, who had also been watching the same thing, was suitably overwhelmed. Subaru, so that's the demon city of Chaos Flame. With a gulp, Subaru couldn't help but express his surprise with his own body. In Lagunica, he had been amazed by the scenic beauty of the Watergate city of Pristella, and in Wallachia, he had been impressed by the difference in architectural styles. However, the spectacle of the demon city looming before him had bore a different impact on Subaru compared to either of these. In Subaru's perception, a city was an assembly in which a large number of people lived, and for this reason, unified styles and rules should be laid down for architecture. However, in the streets of Chaos Flame, no such sense of unity could be sensed. Undoubtedly, it was a crucible of miscellaneous and haphazard principles, befitting a city crowned by the term chaos. At the heart of the city lay the most conspicuous feature, a castle painted in vermilion glossy paint, and the streets expanded out as a circle as if encasing the castle. At first glance, it appeared similar to the structure of the royal capital of Ludunica, but even there one would notice a clear difference between noble, commoner, and poor. Chaos Flame, on the other hand, had none of that. Old ruins beside gleaming buildings, streets were lined with short buildings with sudden appearances of spires twice their size, and desolated sandy areas were adjacent to lush parks. There were countless beams and scaffolding that had been arbitrarily pieced together on top of these streets, and from a distance it seemed as if the entire city were covered in a lattice of spider webs. This was a city that had nothing to do with discipline, neatness, or decency in general. There was only one way for it to be called: the Demon City. He could tell, at a glance, that this was without a doubt a place where chaos prevailed. Al, it looks like a city that could easily crumble with a giant's thrust, doesn't it? Said Al, calling out to Subaru, the former having been squinting at the mayhem, shading the tops of his eyes with his hands, spilling his thoughts about the spectacle that was Demon City. It was a trivial matter, but what was the point of putting his hands over the helmet? Al, I've lived in Wallachia for a long time, but this is my first time coming to the east, so it's refreshing. Subaru, is this your first time in Chaos Flame too? So you've been on the west side of Wallachia all this time? Al, it's more like, I've been in only one place on the west side. There's a coliseum smack dab in the middle of a lake, called Gladiator Island. I was a gladiator there for a long time. Subaru, a gladiator in a coliseum. Subaru was taken aback by the tumultuous grandness of Al's career, which he had incidentally heard about before. The loss of his arm included many of the things that Al had talked about without hesitation were very serious. It was because of the gravity of his situation that he spoke so casually, in order to not make the other person feel uncomfortable, but... Subaru, that doesn't relieve my mental burden at all. Al, MH? What did you say, bro? Subaru, no, not a thing. By the way, what's a giant's thrust? Al, huh? Didn't they say that in your hometown? You know, earthquakes and stuff like that? When asked about the unfamiliar expression, Al twisted his head and replied to Subaru with a question. Although Al and him were from the same hometown in this case broadly referred to their original world, so of course their real hometown would be different. That said, while there were many proverbs related to demons, he could not recall many related to giants. Subaru, maybe it's related to a baseball team? I don't really know much about it. Al, oh, no, I'm not sure. I don't remember where I got the word, and I don't remember being particularly fond of baseball, but... Subaru, I see. Even though you'd look right at home drinking beer and watching a baseball game. Al, in the first place, I never drank anything of the sort. Sharing a bitter smile with Al at those words, Subaru remembered the age at which Al had been summoned to this other world, and inwardly agreed, yeah, that makes sense. In any case, during their little chat, the carriage that transported the group approached the front of the Demon City, the entrance to the City of Chaos. Speaking of entering and exiting the city, the most recent thing that came to mind were the checkpoints in Garrel. Checkpoints had been set up at the main gates of the city, one in the north and one in the south, and in each the identity of people entering and leaving the city would be inquired, along with the purpose of their stay. In the end, it was possibly debatable whether the checkpoints were functioning properly, since they had allowed Subaru and the others to infiltrate, but Zicker's words should then be taken in consideration. The soldiers' eyes must have been burned by the sheer beauty of Natsumi and the others. So it should be treated as a result of their side's skillfulness. Regardless, the existence of such checkpoints was not different between the kingdom and the empire. Every city in Ludunica had such checks. Therefore, Subaru thought that this was a win-or-lose moment, and stepped into the shoes of Natsumi Schwartz again. Guard, enter. Medium, understood. Thanks. Lewis, you. The man had looked around the carriage and given them permission to pass. He was supposedly a part of the city's garrison, and a member of the One-Eye clan, a man from a race with a single large eye at the center of their face. To Subaru, the fact that he had been given permission to enter with just a quick glance was anticlimactic. He wondered if, possibly, the guard held the power to see something special in that characteristic single eye. Subaru, maybe that's why he's been appointed as a gate guard, isn't it? Abel, it appears that you are reading too much into it, but the One-Eye clan does not possess power of that nature. I have heard that they can see a little farther than normal people, but generally, there is no difference in the functioning of their eyes. Subaru, right. Because how'd he let such a suspicious carriage pass by? Subaru, who had put his hand on his chin while trying to convince himself in his own way, barked at the unkind words. Hearing Subaru's high-pitched complaint, the other party emitted a small snort as they adjusted the angle of their face, a mask, an Oni mask in red. Following this, they sank back down in their seats. As soon as he had arrived at the Demon City, Abel had equipped the mask he had brought along. Subaru had protested that such an action would make the guards and soldiers suspicious of him. However, Abel's mask did not come off, and the guards had reacted as he had foreseen, leaving Subaru bitter twice over. Of course, it was good news that Abel had not been suspected. Subaru, it's a serious matter, really. What kind of laws are in place so that the city's first line of defense, the gate guard, is in such a state? Tarita, I agree with Natsumi. I'm wearing clothes with sleeves, and they didn't say anything about it. Subaru, your surprise is of a slightly different nature than mine. Tarita agreed with him, her cheeks stiffened, but unfortunately, the gap in cultures she had experienced was different from that which Subaru had experienced. While Subaru's pertained more so with the way the city carried itself, hers was attributed to her self-identification as a Shidrakian. Subaru. It reminded him of the conversation Tarita and him had around the campfire, before their arrival at the Demon City. Following that event, she never again spoke of the same worries and anxieties, but that did not mean that Tarita had been freed from their fetters. It was a concern that might not go away, even if she were able to achieve the decisive event of taking over as the chieftain. Subaru sincerely hoped that she could reach a resolution that would put her mind at ease if possible, however. Subaru, well, let's focus on the problem of the Demon City. After overcoming the careless checkpoint, the carriage was swallowed by the chaotic and disorderly city itself. The high-pitched cheers of Medium and Lewis being impressed at every step arose from the coachman's seat, and Subaru too witnessed the spectacle of what lay within the Demon City, of that which could not be seen from the exterior alone. The first thing that struck him as he entered the city was the unprecedented number of races. The impact caused by the one-eyed guard at the gate had been quite potent, but once inside the city, he realized that the guard's presence was not particularly eye-catching. In broad terms, there was a large variety of beastmen, and it wasn't just catfolk and dogfolk, there were also rabbit and lionfolk, with a clear distinction between small and large among them, passing through the streets. A group of reptilian-looking lizardmen set up a store, a multi-armed tribesman with many arms, and a group of people with unusually long hair that might or might not be a fashion statement or a racial trait. As soon as he thought that, he noticed a race that appeared to be made of actual stone walking around, and a chimera whose body parts seemed to be mixed with another races as well. Subaru. Subaru was left speechless by this senseless mixture of races. Of course, even in the royal capital of Lagunica, there were scenes that had reverberated within Subaru similarly, which had made him realize that he had been summoned to another world immediately. But later, as he acquired the knowledge required to live in this world, he also learned a smidgen of the complicated circumstances surrounding demi-humans. With how Amelia was ostracized for being a half-elf as an example, the environment for demi-humans in this world could not exactly be labeled as favorable. For better or worse, the custom of keeping away those who were different did not change even across worlds. Consequently, many demi-humans whose appearance very much reflected their characteristics left human settlements and kept to themselves to avoid trouble, so he had heard. The sanctuary, that which Garfield, among others, called home, was one of those. But what about Chaos Flame, which lay in front of Subaru's eyes? The variety of species living side by side and without prejudice aside, what had struck Subaru the most was the way they stood. With their backs straight, everyone was proudly asserting their own species. Beastmen that did not curl their claws and fangs, lizardmen that would not polish their scales, and those whose shapes were considered abnormal would not cover their faces and bodies with cloth. To Subaru's eyes, this was novel. Abel, what kind of laws are in place, you said? The one to speak suddenly was Abel, sporting the Oni mask, remaining in his seat. While not only Medium on the platform, but also Subaru, Al, and even Tarita were looking around curiously, the Emperor, his visage concealed, drew Subaru's attention with his words and continued. Abel, as you can see, what we have here is lawlessness. If you ask what sort of law prevails, that would be an intangible sort. It is a mockery of the nature of order, a city of vices, if you will. Subaru, vices. People are impressed, yet you still managed to put a damper on it. Abel, impressed? It left a deep impression on you? I guess that is to be expected from an outsider such as yourself. Abel shrugged his thin shoulders at Subaru's response, with a slight grimace on his face. The word outsider once again made him feel like he did not belong, which in turn reminded Subaru of the argument they'd had in the carriage a few days prior. In spite of that, as Subaru had been the only one becoming emotional, the other party would probably laugh at him labeling it an argument. Al, but ain't the concept consistent throughout the city that of disorder itself having become order? What do you think, Abel-chan? Abel, if you question the nature of order, you shall know whether the city is disorderly or not. Where do you believe the essence of order resides in the first place? Al, getting all philosophical on me. Bro, pass. Subaru closed one eye at Al, who had given up on thinking pretty quickly. However, unlike Al, bereft of pride, Subaru was not willing to raise the white flag so easily. He crossed his arms and twisted his neck, permitting his long hair to flow over his shoulders, then stated. Subaru, the essence of order is not that, everyone getting along. Harmony. Abel, the essence of order is to be the same. Without reacting to Subaru's opinion, which sounded like he was in the lower grades of elementary school, such was Abel's statement. Frowning upon his words, Abel resumed piling on. Abel, it is many beings sharing the same values. It may be doctrines or beliefs, goals or self-interest. When as a group, rather than as an individual, the identity that does not deviate from each other is called order. What is built on the foundation of that order is the pipe dream you spoke of. Subaru, pipe dream. Do you think peace is that ridiculous? Abel, struggle is an unavoidable human instinct. Even if the weapon for that is not a sword, but a language or a country, the essence remains the same. But order is the perfect mechanism for shaping an environment far from collapse. Behold. Jerking his chin, Abel urged Subaru and the others to look out the window. As he sat in his seat, he presented them with something that they could be confident of its presence without bothering to look out the window, the Red Castle, the symbol of the Demon City. Abel, as the clown said, there is an order called disorder in this city. And that poses as the reason as to why the city has not fallen into collapse, despite its existence as a melting pot for myriad species. Subaru, that castle. No, inside the castle. Abel, Yorna misfigure. The sound of Abel's voice assaulted Subaru's eardrums, which trembled slightly. Abel, his expression unseen behind that mask, spoke of that name. But what did he think of the existence of the most problematic person in the 9 divine generals? One who could be indispensable for him to regain the throne. The demon city where various things stood in close proximity, both vertically and horizontally, where people without any sense of unity would arrive and leave. The castle at the city's core appeared to be looking down on the emperor's group that had arrived at its laps, its glossy outer walls glowing with a mysterious light. The information provided in advance regarding Yorna misfigure amounted to little. One of the 9 divine generals, the strongest of the Valachian Empire, and a woman who had been anointed with the rank of 7th. Although she held a position as a general of the empire and was counted as one of the swords of the emperor, she was a loose cannon who had brought unnecessary chaos upon the country by committing rebellion many times. Zikr had been the one to supply information about the 9 divine generals to Subaru on the behalf of the emperor, who was incapable of communicating with others, but the only 2 people whose humanity he had vaguely spoken about were Yorna and Cecilus, the first. In short, Subaru, from the craziest men and women of the empire, it's the woman who's the one that's recognized as such. With those words, as he mulled over what laid ahead, Subaru's fake chest became laden. Negotiating with the woman was the challenge at hand, but eventually he would have to face the man as well. Moreover, there was also an agreement on the fact that if they did not have him as an ally, they were almost certain to lose. Although when he started to say the same thing, he was reminded of the talk about order that Abel had given. Subaru, it's those who are far from orderly that we've got to deal with, isn't it? With a slight headache, Subaru muttered as he brushed a strand of hair off his forehead with his fingers. Abel's reasoning was deeply interesting, as expected of the emperor, but whether it would be of use in capturing Yorna soon was debatable. However, he was not simply trying to assert his dominance by telling Subaru something clever, instead he wished to convey something else. The order of the demon city. Chaos flames seemed to be overflowing with people and things in a chaotic and disorderly manner, but even in a pot brewing such bedlam, an order that would not crumble existed. Abel had declared that this order was Yorna misfigure. In other words, Yorna was in possession of the ability and ingenuity to bring all this disorder together and keep it from overflowing out of the pot. That was why Abel had not ordered her removal from the 9 divine generals, or even her execution, despite the fact she was a dangerous rebel with a history of multiple revolts. Al, but I'm sure she's got a screw loose, and I don't want to get the short end of the stick, bro. While Subaru was lost in thought, Al, casually sitting cross-legged, laughed at him. Subaru exhaled, lighted as he peeked at Al, the latter sitting in a slouched position on the wooden floor. There were times when his calmness would save the day, but it was on a case-by-case basis. Subaru, Al, please behave yourself. You never know when, where, or who might be watching you. Also, please stop calling me bro. Al, hearing you out about my attitude and posture's fine, but aside from bro, what should I call you? Something like bro but written as sis? Subaru, isn't that something that can't be conveyed without the kanji? The beauty of the Japanese language's variety of expressions was mind-boggling, but at present, there was no use in increasing the number of exchanges between Subaru and Al that could only be understood by the 2 of them. What they needed was a way to call each other externally. Subaru, since you address Medium-san, Torita-san and Abel as Chan, wouldn't it be more natural if you addressed me as such? Al, then, Natsumi-chan? Whoa, gives me goosebumps. Subaru, please withstand the urge. You lack so much composure. As the leader of the group, Subaru reprimanded Al, who showed the hair on his right arm standing on end. It was a strange thing to say, but it was unavoidable, because seniority had not played a role in the selection of personnel this time around. Considering the weighty part he had to perform, tempering his behavior was something Subaru had to do. At any rate, Subaru, we're already inside the Crimson Lapis Castle. The whisper not leaving his mouth, Subaru began putting his mind in order. Yes, Subaru and the others had already been invited to enter the Crimson Lapis Castle at the heart of the Demon City, as they had sought an audience with Yorna Mishigir, the lord of the city. After the entrance to the Demon City had been accomplished, the subsequent actions were swift. They had procured an inn in which they could stay with their Galewind horse and carriage, booked a room, and began actions towards their goal of conquering Yorna. Having said that, because they had already decided what steps were required on the way there, no hesitation was to be found in their actions. The action to be taken was: Abel, deliver this to the lord of the castle, Yorna Mishigir. She should respond. With that, Abel handed Subaru a letter written by him. The envelope containing the letter was enclosed with beeswax, rendering it impossible to open. It was customary for important documents to be stamped with a ring, or similar, bearing the family crest before the beeswax hardened, as proof of their origin. However, there was no such proof stamped on the sealing wax of the letter he had been given. Abel, both of the Emperor's symbols I took with me have already been shattered. One by you, the other in the city hall of Garel. Subaru, oh, the lifeblood ritual and the Arakia panic, yes. But if we don't have anything to show where it came from, I wonder if she'll read it. Even if she does, will she really believe us? Abel, there is no need for unnecessary concern. I shall not disclose the contents of the letter, but I have made it so that if she reads it, she shall know I am its writer. Subaru, I see. By the way, wouldn't it be more reliable if you went there in person? Subaru asked frankly as he put the letter he received in his pocket. The reason why he had been requested to hand over the letter was because Abel would not accompany him to the castle. It seemed like a problem that could be solved in one go had he gone along, even if it meant proving his identity and circumstances. In the first place, hadn't Abel gone along with them to negotiate directly with Yorna? Technically speaking, with Abel not going there, wouldn't it be the same as if he had stayed behind in Garel? Subaru, if anything, I think the journey would have been much more relaxed that way, without having to worry about checkpoints along the way. Abel, your disrespect knows no bounds, does it? Subaru, because you're disrupting our vibe all by yourself. More precisely, it was not restricted to just Abel. Lewis's presence, too, was one of the disruptors. But since he wanted to give Abel a snide remark at this juncture, he put aside the matter of Lewis, a specialist in disturbing Subaru's mind. Abel, it goes without saying, but I shall be having a direct word with Yorna Mishigir. However, it is not convenient for me to make my entrance so prematurely. You, too, should perceive that. Subaru, perceive. Oh, yeah, that's right. Abel's grumpy words, conveyed through that Oni mask, peacefully convinced Subaru. Now you mention it, this was an opponent who had been involved in several rebellions in the past. From Yorna's point of view, the rebellion had most likely been raised because of her dissatisfaction with Abel's rule. Naturally, the relationship between Abel and Yorna was like water and oil, or in some cases, like a smoldering powder keg. It's already something that he dragged himself all the way to the Demon City. Abel, at present, your task is to deliver the letter to Yorna Mishigir. However, you must keep it secret that it is a missive from me, from the Emperor. Subaru, why not? If I don't say that, won't I get turned away at the door? Abel, it's just in case. Nothing bad shall befall you for allowing her to read the letter, however I cannot read her mind before you hand it over. Therefore, be creative. Subaru, creative. Subaru looked at Abel in surprise as he was thrown an unexpected challenge. The latter crossed his arms, his expression still hidden by the Oni mask. Abel, if you look at this city, you can get a rough idea of her temperament and how she weighs her likes and dislikes. Use all the gumption you possess to get her interest. Subaru, there was some malice in your phrasing. Abel, I do have a backup plan, but I would prefer to not rely on it. It shall not endure for much time. Considering my purpose, we have a long way to go. Do you comprehend that? Subaru, you really are a pompous man, aren't you? Subaru's lips curved in a grimace at the manner in which Abel spoke his instructions. He was not afraid to side with Yorna now, and raise a rebellion against Abel. With that rumination in his consciousness, he felt like he could get along with Yorna. If they could both have a chat about their grievances against His Majesty the Emperor, they could become best friends. Subaru, well, I guess I'll proceed in that direction then. Abel, you seem to have had a flash of inspiration, however, it does not appear to be anything proper. As far as he was concerned, there was nothing persuasive about being told that by the initiator of something improper himself. And so, after going through with this, Subaru and the others had made their way to the epicenter of the demon city, the Crimson Lapis Castle, the residence of Yorna Mishigyr. In accordance with Abel's instructions, they were taken up to the castle while going without the mention of his name. Although this was a somewhat unusual move, Yorna's private soldiers, who were as unconcerned as the gate guards, ordered Subaru and the others to enter the castle and await an audience with Yorna. All said, Subaru and the others were now spending their time inside the castle, within a large waiting room with a wooden floor, until Yorna, the lord of the castle, was ready. There were no guards in the waiting room, and they could leave at any time if such was their will. The laxity and carelessness of the security system was enough to make Subaru, an outsider, nervous. In the first place, things had proceeded so smoothly that even Subaru was bewildered. Subaru, of course, it's convenient, but if they let visitors into the castle like this, with or without the general first class, wouldn't they be given free rein to assassinate? Al, in fact, they haven't even taken away our weapons. I was surprised when they said we could enter with them. Medium, well, we don't mean to be violent or anything. They won't get mad. Subaru and Al were taken aback by their response, which frankly smelled more of defenseless than magnanimity. However, Medium, who had been sitting calmly beside them, laughed boisterously at their conversation. Subaru, Al, and Medium had been the three to embark to the Crimson Lapis Castle as messengers. The remaining people, Abel, Tarita, and Louis, were currently waiting at the inn. Since Abel could not come to the castle, one of them had to stay behind to guard him. And since he wanted to avoid having to spare hands for Louis's protection, who would be in no conceivable scenario be useful, their split had resulted in this. Subaru, I also briefly thought about the possibility that the owner of this castle likes unusual things. If that were the case, it was possible that the people of Shudrak, who would scarcely leave the forest, would attract Yorna's interest, so making Tarita a member of this had come to mind. However, leaving Abel and Louis alone at the inn was not an option, so the outcome produced was that Tarita had been left with a rather laborious load. Al, even if she likes unusual things, with so many species in the city, wouldn't one or two Tarita-chans be considered unusual now? Subaru, yes, I thought so too. That's why we're going with this plan. Medium, Natsumi-chan, you're so bold. I was surprised, and so was Alchin. Al, yeah, Alchin was so surprised. Even though Subaru had his reservations about Al, who shamelessly took advantage of Medium, the latter saying right, with a tad of pride. Subaru had a bright idea upon being asked to deliver Abel's letter as a messenger while being disallowed to mention his name. In fact, the reason they had been allowed to enter the castle this way was probably because his idea had worked out so well. Subaru, the hint for our conquest is, Abel pisses me off. Medium, ha, Natsumi-chan, you do snap at Abel, don't you? I think it's awesome. Subaru, awesome? Am I? Or is it Abel's terrible character? Medium, both of them. Subaru, you've got some nerve too, Medium-chan. Raising her hand cheerfully, Medium alluded to the relationship between Subaru and Abel. The relationship between Subaru and Abel was not quite like that of water and oil, but they had no choice but to walk along the same direction, hence, they were bumping shoulders with each other as they went. In terms of a close relationship, it could be said to be similar to that between Subaru and Julius in a time past. However, taking in mind the stuff at Pleiades Watchtower, Subaru put a lot of faith in Julius. Though he would never tell him that, nor was he intending on displaying it via his attitude. Subaru, but it's not that easy either, you know? To put it plainly, one could guess that the rivalry had faded and that they had come to terms. However, that too was the result of a long road, as well as a reasonable quantity of peaks and valleys having been overcome. Improving relationships was no trivial undertaking. A rough road would never be leveled unless both parties were willing to make it better, at the very least. Even if one side attempted to smoothen it, as long as the other trampled and laid waste to it, it would never happen. Thank you for your patience. Messengers, this way. Such bitter sentimentality was interrupted by the words of a servant who had made her appearance in the waiting room. The girl who had shown up was the same girl who had guided them here, a deer person with large antlers on her head. She was a half-beastman who, the antlers on her head aside, mostly resembled a human being. The girl, still in her mid-teens, wrapped her slender body in a kimono-like outfit, its long hem sweeping the floor as she led Subaru and the others. The grace of that figure and that gesture made Subaru's knowledge tingle slightly as he recalled something similar. With Subaru not being capable of putting a finger on it, the girl who was guiding them conducted them to the upper parts of the Crimson Lapis Castle, to the very top level. The Construction of the Crimson Lapis Castle gave the impression that it was closer to the old-fashioned Japanese castles in Subaru's knowledge, rather than the Western-style castles that he had grown used to seeing. Naturally, the materials used and the architectural style were different, but the interior and the way the floor had been designed with big open spaces gave him the aforementioned impression. One of the reasons for this could be the fact that here and there people clad in a kimono could be seen, together with the girl who had been showing them around. In any case, Subaru and the others followed the guide in a well-behaved manner, having been brought to a room where they would meet Yorna. "Please wait here. Yorna-sama shall be here shortly." Subaru: "Yes, thank you." "Oh." After thanking the girl for showing him around, Subaru was ushered into the hall, where he tilted his head. The reason for this was the presence of previous guests in the hall. Within the atrium, there were figures other than the three of them who had been ushered in, all facing away as Subaru's gang entered from the back of the room. That neither of the figures was Yorna, the lord of the castle, was clear from the fact that the chair placed at the far end of the room was empty. "Subaru, those people over there are. These are the people who, much like you, have requested a meeting with Yorna-sama. Yorna-sama is a capricious person, so she wishes to see everyone at once." Subaru: "Yes." Subaru groaned a little from the difficulty of nodding at the girl's nonchalant words. It was an idea that was not only unreasonable, but also illogical. In the first place, even if such a situation had been arranged, it would be an extremely awkward one for people who did not even know each other. There were times a party would wish the contents of their words would go unheard by strangers. "Al, and that's exactly what we are, Natsumi-chan." "Subaru, if you call me that, then I'll get goosebumps too." Having had his innermost thoughts peeked into and been called out, he replied to Al. In fact, albeit the details of the letter he had brought along were unclear, it would undoubtedly describe the circumstances in which Abel had been forced to abdicate his throne and request Yorna's cooperation as a foothold to regain it. Since they had no clue about Yorna's personality, what her reaction to the letter was likewise unknown. At the very least, Abel had stated that she would not wrong them, were she able to read the missive. "Servant, please wait inside. Yorna-sama is here." Ignoring Subaru and Al, who were whispering to each other, the girl who was leading the way bowed and stepped back. Of course, stopping her would not change the situation. If the one who had ordered her to do so was her master, Yorna, it would be pointless to blame her for this. "Medium, so, what are we gonna do?" Medium tilted her head as she shook her tied-up hair as she pleased, and touched the twin blades on the back of her waist. She was quietly following Subaru and the others' plans, which made her surprisingly reasonable. Medium, who gave the impression of being uninhibited and emotional, was, however, obedient to the directions she had been given. Perhaps this was the result of the partition of roles between her and Flop in their journey as a duo. Subaru rubbed his eyes in response to Medium's straightforward and honest question, rocked his head, and with a "we can't do anything about this," he stepped into the room. "Subaru, just in case, let's ask her to clear the room before handing her the letter. We may be refused, but things are what they are. There's no harm in trying." "Al, if it were the princess, there's a chance she would have your head chopped off, saying it didn't suit her fancy, you know?" "Subaru, please don't give me such an example." Having been presented with this most extreme of cases made him become more wary of Yorna, who may also be one such extreme being. As Subaru hesitated a little to enter the hall, Al tapped him on the shoulder. "Al, don't worry. I told you. I'll lend you a hand. Today, I ain't gonna let Br. Natsumi-chan get into any trouble." "Subaru, Al. You're the one who's making me nervous." With those words, Subaru then glared at Al's hand on his shoulder. Al hurriedly withdrew his hand, but for better or worse, his shoulders had relaxed. Accepting Al's sentiment with gratitude, the three of them also stepped into the hall. The atmosphere of the large hall was, the absence of tatami mats excluded, akin to that of a tatami room in a historical drama, where the lord of the castle would hold council with his vassals. Same went for the messengers in the seats below, waiting for the lord of the castle to make their appearance in the upper seat. "Subaru, for the moment, let's stay over here, shall we?" Advancing through the hall, Subaru settled down in a position opposite to that of the previous guest. It seemed strange to sit in front of or behind the guests, so he took a position on either side of the hall, keeping a slight distance from them. In historical dramas, there was a strange pattern in which the vassals would deploy to the left and right of the lord of the castle, leaving the front of the hall open. And they had ended up in a matching arrangement. Pondering that this coincidence was strange, Subaru took a glance at the guests that were there before. The other party amounted to 4 people, and like them, they had kept their weapons on their bodies. Among them was one devoid of weapons, sitting a tad ahead of the other 3. Perhaps that person was their representative, and the other 3 their guards. Subaru, they all seem more dependable than Al. So did Subaru speak, while looking sideways at the three guards and trampled all over Al's earlier concern. Moving on, he turned his attention to the front of the guards, to the person being protected by them, even though he thought it rude. What kind of person had required to seek audience with Yorna, and for what purpose? Subaru, hook. At that very moment, Subaru's throat tightened up due to shock, his cheeks and neck completely frozen stiff. An inaudible voice leaked out, and as he turned his face down in a panicked reaction, the person in question heard the sound, then directed their gaze towards him. However, having seen Subaru's face directed downwards and in line with the elevated seat in front of them, his gaze fell away, as if he was not interested, and his attention was diverted. Sensing this, Subaru took a gentle breath at the explosive beating of his heart. Al and Medium behind him seemed to think it strange to see Subaru like this, but they soon would experience the same jolt that Subaru had. Because... Subaru, you've got to be kidding me. That was Subaru's bitter complaint, and, just 5 meters next to him, waiting for Yorna Mishigure to make their appearance, was a man donning the same visage as Abel, who was not supposed to be here. End of chapters 35 and 36, A Night for Talking.